Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 87th ever Highlight Haven interview. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by NFL draft analyst John Vogel. John, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Absolutely. And, getting right into it, as I mentioned during the intro, you're an NFL draft analyst and a co host on the Sick podcast. I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to work in the sports industry and how do you describe the journey you've taken to get to where you are today?
Unorthodox would be the word that I'd use.
Mhm,
I came up basically. I was homeschooled my entire life,
mhm,
so I didn't go to college. I skipped that. I thought that college was for a lot of different things. It's good if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, or something like that. And I kind of felt if I wanted to go do something in football, it was probably be a waste of my time. So I started covering all sports in smaller websites, working for free, just trying to get experience and trying to gain
mhm,
exposure. That every place that I worked at when I started as a writer, and by the time I was moving on to the next website, I was an editor. I was running a section of the website.
mhm,
Um, so it was about 2018 when I got with full press coverage was the name of the website, and I started doing draft coverage. And it was mostly because I had free reign to do whatever I wanted
mhm,
at this website. I could cover the Boston, Celtics. I could cover the New Orleans Saints. I go into whatever I wanted to do,
mhm,
and I started dabbling in draft coverage, and I fell in love with it. And so as I got into the draft and realizing that maybe I don't know as much as I think I do,
mhm,
uh, it became, hey, I need to learn about this stuff and learn how to properly evaluate a player and how to properly project him to the next level. And it kind of became an obsession. So I built that, over the last 6 years into a consulting business. The podcast that we do at the Sick Podcast Network, which is great. They've
mhm,
got a lot of awesome talent on there that I've been able to been very blessed and fortunate to be able to
mhm.
do projects with. Adam
Yeah.
Rank has the Bears podcast. We did a whole, you know, draft series on Chicago Bears prospects last year.
Mhm,
So it's the opportunities have been great and they've been endless. And I'm very blessed and fortunate to be sitting here, in this position where I can talk about, hey, I've made it at this point,
mhm,
and it was a very unorthodox route.
mhm. Yeah, I love to hear that. And, getting into this past NFL draft, the other day, Shador Sanders obviously received a citation. He was
Mhm.
going 101 miles per hour. I think it was a 60-mile per hour zone,
Yep, that's
which
correct.
is his second time getting a citation just this month. So, how do you see this incident impacting Shador going forward, especially considering he doesn't necessarily have that first round or first overall pick treatment? He's a fourth round pick. You don't see this type of behavior from any other fourth round picks.
Yeah, I think it depends on the player, because we had Antonio Brown, who was a fifth round pick,
Mhm.
who,
Yeah.
he had his issues as well. Tyreek Hill was a seventh round pick,
Mhm.
and he had his whole story at West Alabama. When you hear
Mhm.
about, how he got there and stuff from the people over there was insane.
Yeah.
Um, it's just you don't normally see it from a quarterback.
Mhm.
The quarterback, it has to be the mature guy. He has to be the leader of the team. And Shador's in a position where you are the fourth quarterback on the depth chart by default. They
Mhm.
have two veterans there. They have a rookie that they drafted before you. And so you have to carry and conduct yourself in a professional manner to that point,
Mhm.
to overcome and move up the depth chart. So it looks like he's meshed pretty well with the guys in Cleveland. A lot of the veterans like him. That carries weight. He does kind of get the first round
Yeah.
preferable treatment because
Yeah.
of his dad. Um, but at the same time, if this is going to be something that's going to continue, um, it's not going to bode well for his future. The
Mhm.
the NFL is not going to have a lot of patience for it.
And then the other major headline I want to talk about from a player this past NFL draft is Shamar Stewart, who is yet to receive a contract from the Bengals. He left mandatory mini camps just over a week ago. Do
Mhm.
you think this deal will eventually get done? And I know there's been talks about him potentially re-entering the 2026 draft. What's the likelihood of that happening?
I'd say it's less than 5%.
Mhm,
It's hard to sit a year out of football and then come
mhm.
back at any position. I mean, you look at Deshaun Watson is the prime perfect example
Yeah.
of a guy
Mhm,
currently who he sat out a year and a half due to everything that he had going on off the field. And, you know, he hasn't been the same player. It's because the physical toll that it takes, that your body gets accustomed to when you don't do that for a long time, it's very hard to get back your body back into that shape. So it's unlikely that he holds out. I mean, it's happened before, Bo Jackson
mhm,
most notably,
mhm,
but I think the Bengals have a history of having these types of contract negotiations that go very south very quickly with their rookies coming in. Andre Smith back in 2009, I think, didn't sign until the second week of the preseason, and that was during Hard Knocks. So everybody got to watch it live practically. So I think they'll probably get it figured out. It may be very late in the season. They need the help on the defensive line, especially at
mhm,
the edge rusher position where he's projected to play. So I think they do get it done. It's going to be. It might not be for a few more months.
mhm. And then getting into the 2026 NFL draft, I know this is really general, especially considering we're 10 months away and the college football season hasn't actually started yet. Who is one overall sleeper that you have at this moment?
Yeah. So I guess if we're talking maybe a guy that's totally under the radar, not a lot of people are talking about.
Mhm.
Um, I think you probably want to look at the Texas Tech transfers. There's three of them. I'll give you three of them that I really like and that I
Mhm.
highlighted last year in some capacity. Hunter Zambrano, who is an offensive guard. He transferred in from Illinois State. Hunter is a great kid. He's got an NFL body type, and he got hurt last year, so he didn't play as much as people wanted to see him. But now he's moved up. He's gone to Texas Tech, and he'll be probably the starting left guard there this year. And so he's got a good shot to. I already had a draftable grade on him, based on what he did in 2023. He's got a good shot to solidify himself in the beginning of day three, maybe even get up into day two.
Mhm.
They brought a rover, like a roving safety, over from North Dakota State, Cole Wisenowski, who is an absolute freak in nature. He also got hurt last year, but he put together two really good seasons as a starter at North Dakota State. So he's got that. And then Will Jados, he'll be the left tackle. He's
Mhm.
a transfer from Miami, Ohio. And he is one of those guys that you put on the tape and he was bigger than everybody. He was better than everybody
Mhm.
from the moment the ball was snapped. And he was doing it in the MAC. So those guys having the step up in competition will be great for them, and they can really solidify themselves as solid players, maybe in the day two, early day three range, but be very good pros at the next level.
Now you mentioned some players. You said day two, maybe early day three. Now, between today and the 2026 draft, who's a guy that you're expecting to have the most growth and potentially work their way into the first round, despite the fact that no one's really talking about them right now?
The best chance is probably the quarterback at Iowa State,
Mhm,
Rocco Becht. Now, his dad is Anthony Becht. He was a first round pick in the early 2000s as a tight end and had a
mhm,
12-year career. He's been coaching with the St. Louis Battlehawks in the UFL and
mhm.
the XFL. And previous to that, he was a color analyst on ESPN.
Yeah.
But Rocco has that Brock Purdy to him. And Brock Purdy just got the big contract. That type of quarterback can
Mhm,
work in the right system. And he's a very similar build and very similar skill set. So I think he might have a better arm than Brock does. So he's one of these guys that if he comes back out and Iowa State runs the table and puts himself in the playoff or in the chances for the playoff again, like they did
mhm.
last year, Rocco could absolutely find himself going in the first round.
Now, obviously the number one pick in the draft is not always the best player since it heavily depends on a team's needs and who has the number one overall pick. That said, right now, who is the top guy on your overall big board?
It's a toss up right now, and it's between Garrett Nussmeier and Drew Aller. And
Mhm.
you typically go quarterback this early in the process because it's usually a quarterback that's going to go first overall, unless you just have, Caleb Downs is a guy that's going to go very
Yeah.
early out of Ohio State. He's a phenomenal, but he's a safety.
Yeah.
So how realistic is it that he goes that high? But he might be the best player in the class. Nick Singleton, the running back at Penn State, is another really good one who he does everything that you want at that position. And I was very surprised he didn't come out this year. Um, but it's really a toss up between those two, and it depends how they play because they're two different types of quarterbacks. Drew Aller is your traditional stand in the pocket with mobility. He's drawn comparisons to Josh Allen, but he's got the strong arm. He can make any throw in the book. He's just got to be more consistent. Garrett Nussmeier, on the other hand, he's more of the Baker Mayfield type of quarterback where he's gritty. He can make a lot of throws. He's got an underrated arm, but he's really going to have to beat you with his arm and being able to maneuver outside of the pocket. So it really depends how the season plays out for them. But right now, those are the top two that I have.
Now, you kind of just touched on this, but this is a really stacked quarterback class with
Mhm.
guys like Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, and Lenora Sellers.
Yeah.
How do you see this quarterback room shaping up? And then is this a situation where if the first overall pick goes to a team who doesn't need a quarterback, is there a talent in this draft that you think it is worth it for a team who needs a quarterback to trade up to number one?
There could be. Um, there could be somebody, uh, and I think it's probably going to be one of those two.
Mhm.
So I think the new norm that you're going to see in the NFL, in the NFL draft, is a lot of these quarterbacks will stay until they run out of eligibility. And the reason for that is because more experience, more starts is very beneficial. If you look last year in the NFL, the two top rookie quarterbacks in the league
Mhm.
started the most games in college, Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. They were both 5-year starters. They started from the moment they stepped on the field in college. Um, even last year, CJ Stroud started more than Bryce Young and
Mhm.
then and that Anthony Richardson, who only had one season starting. So you see this trend kind of emerging. And the other factor that's coming into play is NIL, name, image, and likeness payments, that
Mhm.
it's almost worth it. It's more times than often than not worth it to stay in college and make
Mhm.
that extra money before you go to the next level. And so it's a win-win. You get the experience, you get the starts that everybody wants you to have. And as long as you go out there and play well, you're going to make more money, from both the NIL and potentially getting picked earlier.
Mhm.
So I think though that's kind of the new norm. So Lenore Sellers, the Arch Mannings, very likely stay this year and go back to school next year. But these guys that they've run out of eligibility. Aller, Nussmeier. There's a lot of talk now. John Mateer at Oklahoma, who just transferred in from Washington State. Klubnik. These guys have an opportunity to kind of put it all together on the field. I think Aller probably has the best chance, statistically speaking, just because he's 6'5", 245 pounds, who moves really well. There's a lot of things that you can
Yeah.
do with that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
None of these guys really have the you know potential. I think Peyton Manning football IQ to put him over the
Mhm.
top. Nussmeier might be the closest. His dad is the offensive coordinator for the Saints, and he played in I think the college and then if I remember correctly, NFL Europe and the CFL. So
Mhm.
you know Aller's probably got the best shot to move up for someone to move up and make that pick. But ultimately, it just depends on the team that's moving, what they like, what kind of quarterback they want. And this year, I think you're going to have a lot of quarterbacks that fit those different systems.
And then this past draft, we saw the Raiders select Ashton Jeanty sixth overall. We don't always see a running back get selected that high, but then you look at this year, with a guy like Jeremiah Love or Nick Singleton, what do you
Mhm.
see as the ceiling for where a running back could get taken this draft? And is there potential for another top 10 running back this year?
Yeah, absolutely there is.
Mhm.
If you look at 2 years ago in the NFL, the top rushing leader ran for
Mhm.
1,464 yards.
Yep.
This past year, we had 2 guys, one guy broke 2,000, the other was very close to breaking it. This year, the NFL saw a drastic rise in the
Mhm.
average yards per carry.
Mhm.
So, what led to this? Essentially, you've got, most defenses are playing base nickel now. So they're taking a linebacker off the field, they're putting extra defensive back there. That makes it easier to run the ball, especially
Mhm.
when you've got a guy
Yeah.
that can do it. So running backs are somewhat making a comeback, maybe not on the second contract side, but as special talents that can come in and play all three facets of the game, be a electric runner, a good receiver, potentially run routes out of the slot or out wide, and be a pass protector. Um, they do all the if you can do all those things, you can go top 10
Mhm.
and be that guy there for the next 5 years. That extra, the first round contract that you get the extra year that you can opt into, especially at the running back position, is 100% worth it.
Mhm. Now, this past draft, there was obviously a lot of great wide receivers with guys like Ted McMillan. And then 2027, that might be one of the greatest wide receiver classes of all time. We'll
Yeah.
have to see with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. Um, could you see the 2026 class potentially being a down year for wide receivers in between two really big years?
Yeah, I could see it. Because we're not getting too ahead of ourselves, but 2028, we got a guy that
Mhm.
might go first overall, and and
Yeah.
Moore. That guy is insane. Uh,
Mhm.
and he's going to Oregon too. He might have the type of year that we just saw Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams have. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely possible. Um, I think that there's enough talent in this class upcoming that they'll be okay.
Mhm.
Um, but we have seen that sort of drop off after those initial 3-4 years that we had where they were incredible classes
Yeah.
of wide receivers.
Mhm.
That kind of goes back to what are we how is the game evolving? That's
Mhm.
one of the most important things that you want to understand as a broadcaster, as an analyst, as a especially as a draft analyst, because it
Mhm.
helps you identify the next big talent.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna to you may remember this 2014 when Odell makes that catch on
Mhm.
Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys. Everybody after that wanted to be a wide receiver. I saw it at my local high school, where everybody the stars were always the running backs or the quarterbacks. Well, now the stars want to play wide receiver
Mhm.
because Odell made that catch. And we saw that develop, 4 years later when we start having these loaded classes of wide receiver. Okay, so what's kind of happened? Well, the position became oversaturated. People wanted to start playing other positions
Mhm.
because it gave them a better shot to play. And so we've seen that drop off a little bit, but now we got some very special talents. Um, it's going to be fun the next couple of years, but I think they'll be okay just because this year in 26, because it's such a vital position. There's so many roster spots that,
Mhm.
every team's got to have 5 or 6 wide receivers now. Um, that the amount of talent that's already there it'll be satisfactory and they'll be able to make something out of it.
Now, for the upcoming draft class, I guess what would you consider to be the weakest position as of now?
That's a very good question. I think what we're kind of looking at is um, linebacker is not great. It's better than last
Mhm.
year, but it's still not great. And that's just because the positional standard for linebackers changed. It used to be you could be either a pass coverage guy or you could be a run stuffer guy and you'd
Mhm.
be okay. Now you kind of have to do it all.
Yeah.
Um, that's a very difficult skill set to identify.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't think they're necessarily too good. I think once you get past Caleb Downs, the safeties aren't great. And so deep safety might be a position that people are going to hammer in free agency next year. And I haven't been overly impressed with a lot of offensive tackles yet. I don't think there's going to be a lot of top out end talent there, which is going to hurt quarterbacks ultimately in the long run because of the impact and the direct result that having a good
Mhm.
offensive tackle plays on having good quarterback play. So the offensive tackle position is not particularly impressive either.
And then kind of getting into your job a little bit, as an NFL draft analyst, you're someone who really looks at pretty much every player in the draft. What are some of the main things you pay attention to when you're evaluating these prospects?
Yeah, so it's first off, it's traits.
Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
so traits would be height, weight, speed.
Mhm.
How well do they just fit the position?
Yep.
Um, Traits is the most important thing when you're evaluating guys and you're trying to identify guys. Once you kind of identify those traits, guys, you start to kind of go into the finer details. Okay, how technically sound are they?
Mhm.
Um, you know, a guy that might be 6'7", 320 pounds as an offensive tackle, that's a guy that you're gonna have, yeah, you're gonna take a look at him because he's big, he's massive,
Mhm.
but he might have issues bending his knees, getting down low enough. You don't want him to be
Yeah.
a waist bender because then he loses his leverage. So it's you look for those traits, and then once you find the traits, you start to figure out, okay, position by position, what are those nasty bad habits that I don't want him to see, I don't want him doing, and is he doing those? So that's the basic process. It's a lot more
Mhm.
complicated than that.
Yeah.
We can get into it if you want, but that would be the most basic way I know how to explain it.
Now you mentioned the traits. Which trait would you say is most important when you're watching the film? And when you see that trait, you're like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna translate well to the NFL level."
Yeah, it's position specific, right?
Mhm.
So most of the time, if I'm watching in the offensive or the defensive line, it's size. Okay.
Mhm.
And there's some guys that you turn on the tape and they're the best player on the field. Once you see that, that's when you know that you're dealing with a legitimate talent.
Mhm.
Just a guy that he's demanding so much attention. He's got all the explosive power. Very strong. He can move decently well. Those are the important things. But when you start getting into like running back, I think it's contact balance. I want to see a guy that sheds tackles as he's running between them. I want guys to bounce off of him. I don't care if he's 5'9" or if he's 5'11" or if he's 6'3", like Derrick Henry. Um, I want to see him find ways to make defenders bounce off of him. Wide receiver, it's athletic ability. How quickly does he get through his breaks? Like if he's getting through breaks in 2 or 3 steps and he's just naturally dropping his hips when he gets up to his break and he's exploding through it, then I've got a legitimate talent. Defensive backs is reactive ability. You look at Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is probably the most gifted naturally gifted athlete in the NFL right now.
Mhm.
Um, you also see the videos of him getting toasted in when he tries to play coverage
Mhm.
against high schoolers in his camps, right? And the reason for that is because he is a very athletic person. He's not a reactive athletic person. So there's a different type of athletic ability that you have to have as a defensive back. And I think
Right.
reactive athletic ability is the first thing that I want to look for. When you watch that guy go into his break, how quickly do you react to it and get into position? How much time is there where you're leaving him open as you're trying to get back into it? That's reactive athletic ability. And so I don't really care about reactive ability when you're a wide receiver, just like I really don't care if you're a pure athlete if you're a defensive back. So it's very position specific. But those are the typical traits that you're looking for: size, across the board, size, speed, just natural ability. How well do they stand out?
Yeah.
Are they men among boys? That's the
Yeah.
huge aspect of it.
Now, how much do you value the um the competition of play? For instance, how much does it affect somebody if they play in the FCS? You look at a guy like Gray Zabel, who played at North Dakota
Mhm.
State. What's the evaluation for him compared to somebody who plays in the SEC?
Yeah, there's a massive difference because of the, you know, Gray is a great player. I love Gray. I got to meet his parents and hang out with them a little bit down at the Senior Bowl this year. They're great people as well.
Mhm,
Gray is when we were evaluating when I was evaluating him,
mhm,
the thing that stood out was this guy is just I mentioned a man among boys. He was the best player on the
yeah,
field. It didn't matter who was on the field with him.
mhm,
Even when they played Colorado, he
yeah,
was absolutely dominant in that game. Nobody could figure out how to get past him. He was mauling downhill as a run blocker. He didn't make a lot of mistakes in that game. And so I think that's the key when you're watching lower level, especially on the offensive line. If they're the best player on the field, you're going to see it immediately. You know what I mean? Like because they just play at a different level. They're playing at a different speed than everybody else on the field, and that's how it was with Gray. So I do value that. Um, I think what I value more when I'm watching in the SEC is just the traits, and then like Shamar Stewart, we talked about him earlier. He's a perfect traits guy. He didn't have the
yeah,
production, but he's a traits guy. And you bet on traits 9 times out of 10 because you have confidence in the coaches that you hire
mhm,
to develop the technique, to develop all that stuff.
mhm,
So you bet on the traits because then at least there's a higher ceiling to that player. So I think competition absolutely matters.
mhm,
You don't want to watch if you watch a guy win 8 out of 10 reps and he's playing, a guy who's going to be an accountant for H&R Block next year. That's you don't put a lot of stock into
yeah,
that. You want
yeah.
you want him to absolutely dominate him.
Now, what position would you say is the toughest to evaluate? Maybe there's a position where, you see a guy who you like and you're almost certain that he's going to be a stud in the NFL. Is there a position where you could see somebody, but you're still not really sure if that's going to translate?
Quarterback. It's 100
Mhm.
percent quarterback.
Yep.
And everybody, I think every evaluator will tell you that because
Mhm.
there's so many variables to playing the position that are unmeasurable.
Mhm.
So if I'm watching, like CJ Stroud was not a guy that I was very excited about coming out of
Mhm.
Ohio State. I was, oh, well, he played in a half field scheme and, he didn't read full field progressions very often. And he was kind of slow doing it at times. Didn't, had the one really good game against Georgia, but for the most part, kind of subpar considering what you'd want him to be. Never saw him, pull the trigger when he saw it. He always hesitated. And all that didn't matter because he got to Houston and they loved the traits. And they had a really great quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator and Bobby Slowick that they were like, hey, when you see it, pull it, pull the trigger, make the throw. And so that was a confidence issue that he wasn't necessarily getting at Ohio State. And so that it impacted the evaluation.
Mhm.
Um, so there's because of the number of variables and the reliance that the quarterback has on the other 10 guys playing with him, it's a lot tougher to evaluate those guys than any other position.
Now, I do have one final question to ask before we wrap things up. If
Mhm.
there was one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring sports reporter or journalist, what would it be?
When you find yourself in a room with a lot of people that have been doing it a lot longer than you, and this is for journalism, this is for,
Mhm.
football itself, shut up and just listen. Be a
Yeah.
sponge.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a great example. The first game that I worked in my career was in 2019. I worked the Music City Bowl. Iowa play excuse me, who was it? Mississippi State played Louisville. That's who it was. Been
Mhm.
to so many games at this point I had to go back and think about it for a
Yeah.
minute. Um the the I walked on that sideline. It was at LP Field in Nashville. Walked on that sideline, and you're looking around for the first time in your life, and you're lost. Like this is an NFL sideline. It's great. It's not an NFL game, but
Mhm.
it's magnificent.
Yeah.
And this guy walked up to me wearing Steelers gear, and he goes, "Hey, you lost?" I said, "A little." and he say, "Hey, hang out with me. My name's Mark Gorsak." And Mark and I ended up becoming great friends. But that's what I did the whole really the first few years I knew Mark was anytime we were at an event somewhere, uh, I followed him around like a lost puppy and I didn't say a word unless I was asked to,
Right.
because these guys have been doing this a lot longer. I think that one of the things our generation doesn't do very well in this country is listen to our elders.
Mhm.
Our elders have experience. They've been doing this stuff a long time, and there's a lot of wisdom that can be learned from them. And the best thing to do is just be the sponge, man, and just listen.
Yeah, I really appreciate that advice, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up, including where they can find some of your work?
Yeah, most everything I do is on Twitter. It's on or X, whatever we're calling it now. There may be some stuff in the works. Hopefully, we'll find out by the end of the week.
Mhm.
But most of what I do, you can find on X at Draft Vogel. And make sure you follow this guy. He's going to be the next biggest star. Oh, I'm pointing the wrong way. He's going to be the next biggest star. All right.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Again, big thanks to John Vogel for being the 87th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we will see you next time.